So we're sitting today in Postmaster's Gallery in Tribeca, and we're going to be having a discussion about women and art. And I thought it would be good for us all to introduce ourselves first. So Magda, if you'd like to.
Hi, I am Magda Sawon. I do run Postmaster's Gallery with my partner, Tomasz Banowicz. I ran it for 30 years, and I would say fearlessly. And we are still here, so that's me.
Hi, I'm Nadia Haji Omar, and I'm an artist. I graduated from the School of Visual Arts in 2014, and very happy to be here.
And my name is Paulina Bębecka. I am a director here at the Postmaster's Gallery, and I've been working with Magda for the past 7-8 years. And I am here.
I'm Diana Cooper. I'm an artist, and I have been showing with Postmaster's Gallery since 1998. And I am also here.
And I'm Donna Cleary. I am also an artist, and I graduated with Nadia in 2014, and I make sculpture, and I also run a project space out of my apartment. And I thought it was interesting that this is a discussion about women in art. It's an all-women panel, and we've got a nice variety of people represented here from the gallery and the different modes of making. And I thought we could start maybe by talking about what you think is the status of women in art today, and just throw it out as a general question. And anybody can start. Magda, I know you had some.
Oh yeah, I'm always first. The status is clearly improving. I would have to say that I can't imagine a woman not to be feminist, because the definition of feminism is basically a notion of equality. So then we splinter that in many different, subsets, subgroups, very often contentious to one another, as any complicated movements and ideas are. But it is very clear to me in 30 years of practicing my job that the patterns of visibility, acceptance, and success have greatly improved. There is many more women artists. I don't think one should, or at least I don't believe in kind of bean counting across the board. I believe that that there's a lot of merit that needs to be included in bean counting, but very clearly there is many more artists, women artists, showing work these days and having success with it, having visibility. Just yesterday it was announced that 2 tremendous women artists are the only visual artist recipients of the MacArthur Grant. That would be Nicole Eisenman and Latoya Ruby Frazier. That is fantastic. And there's just a lot going on, and sometimes you almost wish gender would disappear as an issue.
Well, and that's an interesting question, because it's something I've been thinking about as Nadia, as a young woman who's emerging in the art world now. Do you think that we still need to talk about feminism?
Yes, I think so. It is not over as an ongoing issue, and the show that I was most recently in was a 2-person show with Bain Peterson, and it was really interesting to be in a show with a man and have the work be side by side and be equal in that way. I thought that was really interesting, and it was the first time for me. It raised a lot of issues that I hadn't thought about before, and I don't know how it could be over when women still make less money than men do, when there is just it's the article that was written yesterday or published yesterday by Jerry Saltz discusses this very issue about the paintings of Dana Schutz and Catherine Bernhardt. So if one of the most important contemporary art critics is writing about this issue, I feel like it's still on the table. I feel like there's a long way to go until equality is reached. That's just my opinion.
When I've noticed too that there seems to be, I guess what I'm getting at is it's something that when we're presenting our art or presenting it in a gallery, that, because Magda and Paulina, in the show that you did last year called This is Sculpture, Sculpture Now, which Diana was in, you sort of, you didn't say this is a group show about women sculptors, and I don't know how receptive is the art world to this idea of, saying these are women artists, these are male artists, this is just art. How do you navigate that?
Well, you'll never see a show that's highlighting the fact that it's only men, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, that's why we never said this show was called This is How Sculpture Looks Like. And the fact that 15 participants of this show were women came as a discovery to people that came, and we specifically, this is a show we put together with Paulina, we specifically selected work that was kind of counter-gender, meaning large scale, meaning intense, meaning, kind of come get me level of the work, not what, in some sort of cliches about women art can be applied.
Yeah. I mean, something that I have noticed that's a positive thing that perhaps you have, being, of a different generation than I am, is that there was a period where feminism was a bad word, and a lot of women would reject it, and I like Magda, I couldn't understand that, because I felt, how can you not be a feminist on one level, and that you believe that you are equal, and you do believe in, that you can vote, you believe that you should get equal pay, I assume. And then I've seen that that's changed, and I see, I'm a parent, and I see a young woman who's now 21, and I've been able to watch her become aware of these issues, and to consider feminism as an issue where earlier she would have said, oh, that has nothing to do with me. Right. That's this issue from the 70s or the 80s, or so that's heartening to see that they realize that it is relevant in these very specific ways, in practical ways.
But on the one hand, I think right now also there's a little bit of an overhaul with this kind of deep feministic instincts of trying to just fight for women and forget everything else and bulldoze over everything else, and to consider other issues that we had. I don't know. We had a show where our artist was attacked by feminists because they read the work in a much different way than was intended, really, and that was really strange to witness. That this work, where I thought it didn't merit this kind of aggression from the neo-feminists, maybe, or the really, really aggressive kind. I don't know if I should be talking more about it, because this brings in a completely different issue of of a switch from fighting for something that is really good and something that is very important to just society in general, of being equal on many levels. But it brings in that extreme side of it too.
Yeah, no, I know. And I know when I was starting out, I felt very confused because I was very attracted to issues around feminism or just discovering women. You know, whether it was, I did my thesis on Virginia Woolf, and I read a lot of her work and found it very inspiring, and was sort of seeking out the women, the exceptional women, or Eva Hess. And then I came into the art world in the early 90s, and there was a sense that, well, if you were a woman, you had to make art about your victim status as a woman. And I mean, I'm not saying that was real, but it's just something that I remember feeling that, well, I am a woman, but I'm many things, and I don't want to have to just address my oppression or something. Somehow that to me seems like it's a failure, and in fact I'm allowing the quote-unquote patriarchy to dictate what I do.
Well, it's I'm thinking about my own experience growing up, having my formative years in the 70s, and like you were saying, sort of feeling ashamed on one level that I had chosen the maternal track, that I hadn't gone out, and I was working too, but I had chosen these roles that were traditionally feminine, and sort of went to the opposite direction of what I had been in high school, which was this, stout feminist. And now I'm sort of reclaiming that, looking at Meryl Euclid's and that sort of idea that everything that you do as a mother, etc., is art. And so for me, and looking at what's happening with Planned Parenthood right now, with this move to defund them by the government, I don't know. It's like all of these issues are coming up again, and I think taking on a new kind of urgency to have this discussion. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Magda, any further?
Well, very clearly the picture is much larger than a gender issue. So exactly this kind of zooming on one thing can sometimes be perceived as problematic and narrowing and almost too ideological in a way. But very clearly, I've never, I'm in this country for 30-something years, I've never seen this sort of splinter in a society that basically there's no middle. And there's no common sense, there's no rational thinking. And I would, in fact, apply it a little bit to both sides, but very clearly the sort of moron factor on the Republican end of things is overwhelming. So that very clearly, it's an action response. So very clearly these movements and there is a need and there is a desire to go into more extreme modes of activism in order to counterweight what's happening to this country, to this society, what's happening globally. It can all be extrapolated in much larger fields of, general income inequality, the huge gap in the middle. There's, money that just vanishes into the world of 1% or less. And then there's basically zero interest in culture being promoted by governments, by institutions, by some sort of social agendas that are built on a larger level. Everything got to be privatized. With that come a lot of consequences. These consequences have to do with market consumerism, and these are the outlets in which women lose. So very clearly, there is this desire to get the pitchforks, so to speak.
It's bringing it back to you, Nadia, because some of our classmates, we had a lot of discussions during grad school about feminism, but some of our classmates have said recently, as you were saying, we don't need to think about it anymore. or we don't have to make our work about it. Can it just be art? And I like that idea. So I hope that's where we're heading. Now, you don't specifically talk about gender issues in your work.
No, I mean, I think I feel like it's probably a rite of passage at some point, or at least my generation, a rite of passage that, I did paintings that had dresses in them and, body parts and this kind of thing. I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate it, but I feel like just to repeat what I said, that being a woman is part of my identity. The fact that I'm, American, the fact of who my parents were, the fact of, my education. All of these things make me. I'm not the reductiveness of these kind of categories are dangerous, I think, and that's something I've always tried to resist in my work. But not resist the fact that I am a woman. That's, and that is part of who I am.
Right.
And sort of taking, I think at one point I took on certain things for that purpose. Like I would take on colors like pink or pom-poms, not because I was like, oh, I'm girly and I like these. I found them really repellent, but I was curious to see, can I use this, and will people take this seriously? And
yeah, but this is, you see, where I think we have a little bit of an issue that even though your agenda is much larger and the work is not literally connected to gender issues, the interpretation of it and the critical voices around it, there is very often that roundup that will come to it. So this is, again, a point where it's unescapable on some level, that a woman's work is not read in this point-blank state the way the men's artwork would be read. This trigger of gender is very often built into it. It's not always a gender. I think when, there is a lot of ideologized type of interpretations. I don't know, we showed a piece of Paul Ramirez Jonas years ago, and it was this very ephemeral, beautiful thing that had a self-propelled fan, and one side of it is white, one side of it is black, and people were writing review about racial issues in this piece. So, I think we can enter a stage of overinterpretation to the point of certain paranoias that get there, but again, the woman as an artist that does not want to be pigeonholed into the issues and subject matter can lose in that picture.
I think that, this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I feel like, just specifically if I can talk about painting, because that's what most of my knowledge is in, but also I think maybe you can relate, Diana, is I had a similar experience where I made a lot of work that was really delicate and fragile and feminine and so clearly girly. It was a lot of sewing and doilies, and it was just like a rite of passage, as you described. I felt compelled to do it too, for many reasons. It was in grad school in my first semester, but I quickly left that behind, and I feel that most women artists have reached to abstraction in order to make any statements about spirituality or gender, or in order to avoid the immediate read of this is about being a woman, this work is about being a woman. I feel, this is just my take on it, but if you can compare the artists like Judy Chicago and Agnes Martin compared to, say, Georgia O'Keeffe, whose work was much more literally about the body and about being a woman, I feel like her work was extremely criticized at first, and then the reading is narrow, and it just automatically becomes about desire and female desire, and then motherhood and menstruation, and just those are the readings that work made by a woman that uses parts of the body or uses certain colors like red or pink immediately get this reading, whereas work made by men just has a huge, like vastly more open reading. You know, like a painting, like Rothko can use red and it can mean fire or anger or heat, or it can just be red. But if it was a woman who had made that, the reading is just narrowed, and the first definition, the first associations people make are the association with what it means to be a woman, not about it's just difficult to make a commentary on, personally for me, I think about spirituality, if you have a figurative element in your work and you are a woman. So I have noticed my own work just getting more and more and more abstract as I try harder to say something specific, which is kind of counterintuitive for me, that would happen, but I really want my work to not reveal itself as being made by a woman right away. And the only way I've figured out how to do that is by making it really abstract. So, I mean, this is just a very zoomed in into one experience or one issue, but
yeah, but then you still have the problem that if you make your work abstract, it inevitably will be critically compared to all the abstract master men. So, you know, there is no easy way out of that. Yeah. There is also a fact that in many instances of women artists, they try to disguise gender, even in the way the name is put out publicly. So, you know, there are methods and there are efforts and there are tricks of the trade how you want to degender your work, but the sort of societal stamp still genderizes it, and that's where it's not equal.
Well, what about one of the articles we passed around before this was called Gender Bender, or Gender Bending, and it was about, you know, these men that were reacting to feminism in California, and such as Mike Kelly, who, you know, appropriated feminist art and had this huge career talking about women's work and, you know, using methods that were traditional to femininity. And it's interesting that somehow the art world can accept a man making women's work, but can't accept a woman making women's work. And I just think that's an interesting conversation.
Well, I mean, I think first is that within the history of art in recent centuries, that one of the things that continues to propel it is the ability to appropriate other things, to revitalize it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that sort of sense that everything's available, you know, whether it's, you know, going to Africa or, you know, to Japan or, you know, in earlier times in the history of modernism. And so it just becomes another thing for, in this case, a man to jumpstart or to reinvigorate his ideas and his work. And I was thinking of the other article you had mentioned, which of course is a classic, the Linda Nochlin, you know, where she has this sort of little list of, well, you know, if a man wants to become to cook or to do those domestic things, he becomes a master chef. Right. Or he wants to sew clothing, he becomes an haute couture designer, you know, of an international celebrity. So I think that ability is it's just alive. It's been alive and well of the just outside the arts, but also inside the arts. Because you think of, I don't know, Paul Klee, or you think of all these artists who, that you could use the words fragility, delicacy, frail, or these words that you would identify as in you know, some people would say, oh, those are feminine traits. Mm-hmm. But
and they're just claiming them, right? They're just saying, this is what I do.
But also that they are part of, I mean, you know, I like I like getting on a scissor lift, you know. I like using a big, huge staple gun.
Yeah.
You know, you could say that's masculine, you know. So it's also valid, you know. I mean, it would be boring if we were so adherent to these cookie cutter ideas of, you know.
But don't you think someone like Mike Kelly actually helped the cause of feminism by doing what you described?
Right, but isn't it odd that it took a man to do that? You know, like it took the art world, I'm sorry, we have to wrap up, but the art world embraced that. And if it had been a woman, I wonder, you know, or the female artists that he was appropriating from haven't had the career that he did. That article in particular sort of struck me as, I think part of what feminism did is give us options, you know, and that we have to embrace all of it, all of the options that are available to us, including, you know, making feminine art. You know, and I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends, and I think sometimes the harshest criticism comes from women too. It's like, well, you're a stay-at-home mom, or you're out working all the time, and you know, like we have this contention within our own ranks where I think we need to support. This is just my opinion, all of it. But I don't know. So, sorry, I'm preaching, and I'm going to stop. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about?
Yeah, but like, for example, there is this fantastic situation right now where Michelle Grabner, an artist curator, has received a review in the New York Times where the reviewer wrote that her work and she's a soccer mom. Yes. Awful thing to say. Yes. And then 3 months later, or 4 months later, Michelle Grabner did this piece where she created a soccer ball out of gingham and all these different things. So sometimes the tools of the battle is a very important thing. Sometimes, you know, just screaming and barricades and contention, this kind of aggressive contention, may be problematic. Sometimes you can just, you know, demolish the people and the issues through this powder ball of brilliance and genius, which in fact, this is the moment when, you know, the notion of genius is another thing that Linda Nochlin is writing about, that is a male assigned territory, and maybe it isn't.
Well, we do have to wrap it up now, and I wanted to thank you all for being part of this.